This is a recreation wanted poster for Frank and Jesse James. Can't find a high-quality image of an authentic one. Anyway, Jesse James, pictured on the right, is one of the most famous outlaws in the history of the American West. He is name-checked in the song, and the song is of course called Outlaw Blues. So we have a definite theme. This is good timing too, because just this past weekend, Timothée Chalamet, I still don't know if I pronounced his name correctly, started his musical set on Saturday Night Live by performing this song. And guess what? I thought he did a fantastic job. And no, that's not just coming from a place of being such a Dylan fan that I want anything associated with him to be good, or trick myself into thinking that it is good. And if you want proof of that, I remember on TV seeing a performance from the Twyla Tharp Broadway musical based on Bob Dylan. It was Like a Rolling Stone, and it made me wish I could shove steel wool into my eyes and ears in order to physically scrape out any memory, any imprint from what I had just seen and heard. But yeah, I legitimately thought the SNL performance was great. Part of that is that this is just a very fun song, so I think that was a smart choice. Don't get out there and try to do Like a Rolling Stone or, It's Alright Mom, Only Bleeding. And speaking of fun, that's something multiple people have commented on who've written about the song, is you can sense how much fun Dylan is having with a full backing band playing loud electric blues. And you can say that about other songs on the album, but especially this one, just this real straight up 12-bar blues. It's a loud song, but it's light. It's a light touch. The lyrics have an absurdist aspect to them, which is a really important note because this is the first song on the album that does that, and this album marks a marked shift into surrealist lyrics. Musically, though, like we talked about, it definitely takes its inspiration from the blues and from more than one blues great, but we'll get to that. Here's another picture from that SNL performance. One thing to note is that, as other articles and whatnot have noted, is that the harmonica playing was an overdub, so he's not singing, then playing the harp, then singing in his typical manner. The song is 182 words, so on the short side, especially for Dylan, and structured exactly like She Belongs to Me. 5 stanzas of 6 lines each. Rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, B. And part of that is that the first 4 lines of every stanza is the same couplet repeated twice. And, again, just like She Belongs to Me, that means really only the last 2 lines of every stanza are unique. The penultimate line of each stanza has a unique sound. It ends with a unique sound, unique within that stanza, that is. And the last line is always a return to the sound established in lines 2 and 4. It was nice to get through that so quickly since we covered all of that with She Belongs to Me. By the way, that song was 3 songs ago, so we've had 2 songs in between, Maggie's Farm and Love Minus Zero Over No Limit. So this back and forth that I've talked about on the album continues, meaning we've gone loud song, quiet song, loud song, quiet song, and here we are on the 5th, and we're going loud again. First lines and the first stanza definitely let you know right off the bat this is going to be a weird song. Ain't it hard to stumble and land in some funny lagoon? Ain't it hard to stumble and land in some muddy lagoon? Especially when it's 9 below 0 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What can we say about those lines with interpretive certainty or at least confidence? Not much. I think one thing. And that is that this man here, Sonny Boy Williamson, is getting alluded to with the 9 below 0 lyric. He was a blues legend known especially for his harmonica playing, and that's probably why harmonica is so prominent in this song and had to be overdubbed, because when you listen to the song, you'll hear you couldn't possibly have one person singing the lyrics and overlaying harmonica on top of that, but Dylan wanted to do both. He could have just had a harp player, but he didn't go that route. And I would be willing to bet a lot that one of the things Dylan likes about the phrase 9 below 0 is the internal rhyme, 9 below 0. And if that's the thing we can say with the most confidence about the lines in the first stanza, the other one, or the next most confident thing we could say, is that the 3 o'clock reference is probably a reference to 3 O'Clock Blues, a song made famous by B.B. King. And that's a classic Dylan technique to do 2 tips of the hat and or references that are related to each other in one couplet. And now to get to the part I'm most excited about, we have to go from confident to somewhat confident to speculative. Because we like to break new ground on this channel with this video series when possible, when responsible, so even speculating here, I think we've got something. People just dismiss the lagoon, which of course shows up twice. It's the same line, although Dylan changes the adjective. They dismiss the lagoon as just some bit of fun nonsense. And not that anybody says this, but given the rhyme scheme, since he presumably wants to end with the line about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then he needs something that rhymes with it. And he's starting his character off stumbling around outdoors somewhere, so okay, lagoon. Why not? It's just a lark of a song anyway, etc. But notice, Dylan changes it from a funny lagoon to a muddy lagoon. And a muddy lagoon, that's kind of a weird thing. You wouldn't normally describe that kind of a body of water that way. And that, I think, would normally be more something like this. You know, a muddy river. Think of like the muddy banks of the Mississippi. I was on the banks of the Mississippi earlier this year, and it was quite muddy. The Mississippi Delta is very muddy. The Mississippi Delta and the Mississippi is inextricably linked to the blues. All to say, here are the final 3 lines again. And land in some muddy lagoon, especially when it's 9 below 0 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What if muddy lagoon is a tongue-in-cheek reference to muddy waters? A lagoon is filled with waters. Muddy lagoon, muddy waters. And he's about to be invoked in just 2 lines. And then, of course, the next 2 lines after the Muddy Lagoon line, they're both about the blues, which has all those associations that I just talked about a second ago. But the lagoon line sets up to and rhymes with the muddy waters, meaning the 3 o'clock in the afternoon line. I think that's what's going on there. Next stanza takes us from this muddy lagoon, or this very blues-like environment, to the Wild West, and the previously mentioned Jesse James, not in the song, but by me at the start of this video. Ain't gonna hang no picture, ain't gonna hang no picture frame, ain't gonna hang no picture, ain't gonna hang no picture frame. Well, I might look like Robert Ford, but I feel just like a Jesse James. This is explicitly exoteric, not esoteric. Dylan knew, and assumed everybody would know, this is an obvious tip of the hat to the murder of Jesse James by his associate and fellow gang member, Robert Ford. He was shot in the back of the head, while, supposedly, this is the lore, hanging a picture. Now, remember, the song is called Outlaw Blues. Well, yeah, you're going to be singing the blues from, heaven or hell if you were assassinated by one of your own. In this case, this guy here, Robert Ford. But what Dylan does with this well-known instance, and remember, his generation, they were raised on westerns and tales of the Old West. So what he does, I think, is really clever. First of all, rhyming James with frame, and given the manner of his death, that's nice. All right, he was hanging up a framed picture, but that last couplet, well, I might look like Robert Ford, but I feel just like a Jesse James. Now, what does he mean by that? I think we can fairly safely interpret what's going on here. Remember, this is an album of personal artistic liberation for Dylan, bringing it all back home. He hadn't done his very famous / infamous set at the Newport Folk Festival. That was in '65, the same year, but it hadn't happened yet when he was making the record. However, he knew, as he made this record, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to lose their S over this turn that he's taking. And presumably, we like to think that's why Maggie's Farm has these lyrics about personal liberation and not wanting to be a slave to the expectations of others. I may look like Robert Ford. I may look to you like a traitor when you hear this song and the other loud electric songs on this album. But I feel like Jesse James. I feel free playing this music. And Jesse James was a famous outlaw. Outlaws live outside the law, outside of society's expectations. And that's why they were so often admired, even though they were so often thieves and killers, like Jesse James. And Dylan, even way back on the freewheelin', liked this idea, the mythologized outlaw. Look here, buddy, you want to be like me? Pull out your 6-shooter and rob every bank that you see. Tell the judge I said it was all right. That being from a song off of the freewheelin', and then in a future album, don't forget, right, Blonde on Blonde. But to live outside the law, you must be honest. This picture, by the way, is presumed to be of both Jesse James and Robert Ford. So anyway, everything in this stanza, I think, is brilliant and grossly underappreciated. And now we go from when we started with basically the Mississippi Delta to the Wild West. Well, where are we now? Next stanza. By the way, it's nice to not have to show the lyrics. I don't feel like that's necessary here because they're so stripped down. Well, I wish I was on some Australian mountain range. Oh, I wish I was on some Australian mountain range. I got no reason to be there, but I imagine it would be some kind of change. Wonderful section. I think it kind of typifies the madcap aspect of the song. And yes, all of the following pictures that you're going to see of mountains and frontier-style images are from Australia, by the way. So there's a point to me saying that, too. Because just like lagoon I'm arguing is not some random, just kooky element. Same thing with what seems like the most random element in the song. I'm going to recap the stanza here, not read it all. Meaning again, wish I was on some Australian mountain range, got no reason to be there, imagine it would be some kind of change. That's great just even on the surface level. It's fun, it's crazy, it's random. I wish I was so far from here. I wish I was out in the mountains of Australia, the other side of the earth. But again, back to my hypothesis that this is not a random element. Australia has its own frontier, expansionist, cowboys and outlaws and natives history. Even with similar scenery and landscapes. I mean, look at this picture here. This would work great in a Western film. And just like there were frontiersmen and cowboys, there were outlaws. The frontier tends to be a more lawless place than more established communities. And so they had their own famous gangs and outlaws, desperados, whatever you want to call them, although they generally called them bushrangers, and I think maybe bushwhackers down there. And, it's not just he's picturing himself in Australia or in Australian mountains. No, Australian mountain range. The word range is, I believe, a tell, because it's so synonymous with the Wild West and expansionism and all that, the frontier in the American mind. When Dylan's narrator pictures himself on some Australian mountain range, he's driving home the outlaw theme yet again. Need further corroboration on the Australia not being random? Well, what is its very famous origin? As a British penal colony, of course. Speaking of all this, it was no doubt a thrill for Dylan to play an outlaw in a Western film, as seen here. That, of course, being the movie Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. The penultimate stanza starts a turning point in the song, possibly serving as kind of a bridge. We've talked about how Dylan hints when a song is starting to wind up through the lyrics. So here we notice right away it's not some other location. He just seems to be standing here in front of us. I got my dark sunglasses. I got for good luck my black tooth. I got my dark sunglasses. I'm carrying for good luck my black tooth. Don't ask me nothing about nothing. I just might tell you the truth. And so that is really different from what we've seen before. I mean, as a stretch, you could say the dark sunglasses are maybe the modern equivalent of the face-hiding bandana of an outlaw. I don't see that, though. I'm just saying someone could try to make that case. And then, meanwhile, the other half of this, in the first 4 lines, he's carrying a good luck charm. Okay, that does not seem synonymous with being an outlaw in any way. But now that's our cue to think back to the very first stanza. It didn't have anything like that either. It was just very blues-related. Dylan, as an artist, has kind of stumbled into the blues, into being a bluesman. Then we get 2 stanzas in a row that definitely deal with the outlaw theme, which matches the title. Well, and importantly, at least the first half of the title, because the first half of the title is the word outlaw. The second half is blues. This song is brilliant on a level no one has ever realized before, and that is what I am here to point out. Every stanza of the song is dedicated to either the outlaw aspect or the blues aspect. And this is a picture of John Lee Hooker, by the way. And here in the penultimate stanza, we're back to the blues. Dark sunglasses matching metaphorically with a black tooth. Remember, one of the awesome things about Dylan's lyrics is that you often have to think about where the words sit in relation to other words on the page, so to speak. So look here at the top, the first couplet. Dark sunglasses, black tooth. Dark and black, oh, by the way, they rhyme as well. And then, you know where I'm going with this, if you know this video series, they metaphorically rhyme as well. And they're juxtaposed over each other in the lyrics. Not quite physically, because one sentence, one line is shorter than the other, but they're both the second to last word. They're in the same position. Why do I say this stanza is about the blues? Well, the sunglasses, again, for reasons like I'm showing here here's John Lee Hooker again. But then, the dark and the black. I think there's a little bit of a wordplay going on here. Who invented the blues? Was it white people? No. And meanwhile, in particular, the black tooth is a mystery because I searched as much as I could for folklore, blues, Mississippi Delta, southern United States, folklore, superstitions, you name it, about using a rotten tooth as a talisman of some kind. Maybe Louisiana voodoo, something like that. Could not find anything quite like that, but there is a long, and I wasn't surprised by this, tradition of using teeth in magic. If anyone can find a reference to that being used in the milieu that I've been talking about, I would really appreciate it. Drop that in the comments. Regardless, I think the website reclinernotes.com was dead on in claiming that the black tooth as a device in the song is supposed to be some kind of, it's the bluesman's good luck charm. Well, obviously Dylan says it's a good luck charm, but it's a talisman, what was known as a mojo hand. This is a really interesting folkloric device, so it's kind of like your medicine bag, you know what I mean? It has magical power to keep you safe, to see you through to good fortune, etc. So if we want to move forward with the premise that this stanza is definitely about the song's narrator and Dylan himself envisioning themselves as this bluesman who, in the context of the song overall, is an amalgamation of the classic Western outlaw and a Delta bluesman. Then we can move on to the final couplet in the stanza. Oh, first I should mention that the black tooth and the dark side glasses were recycled bits from a song that never really took root in Dylan's mind, California. But this is something he did all the time. Writing material that he would use in a given song, but then change it, use it in another one, whatever. Back to the final couplet in this set of lines. Don't ask me nothing about nothing, I just might tell you the truth. That's great. Classic Dylan. Very difficult to not take that as a nod to his mischievous past of lying to reporters in interviews. And in those press conferences and interviews, not just in this era here that we're seeing in this picture, but even when he was just brand new on the scene and getting interviewed, the young Ernest Folke, who was a nobody, even then he, right out of the gate, was just lied and spin up tall tales. And back to Chalamet, this is something he talked about in terms of studying up on Dylan. He couldn't believe how audacious Dylan was in those interviews and press conferences. Because, you know, you're young, you're trying to become known, you're thankful for the visibility, the interview, so you do what Chalamet says he's always done, which is be very compliant and earnest, and instead Dylan is kind of doing the opposite, and of course later he would get very antagonistic with the press, and then sometimes he would tell them uncomfortable truths. Like that he didn't have a very high opinion of the reporter's publication. All of that, in my opinion, encapsulated in those two lines. Okay, final stanza. I got a woman in Jackson, I ain't gonna say her name. Oh, I got a woman in Jackson, I ain't gonna say her name. She's a brown-skinned woman, but I love her just the same. The line, she's a brown-skinned woman, is from Robert Johnson's When You Got a Good Friend, so the song returns now at the end to what it did at the beginning, alluding to blues greats, and that makes sense since this is one of the bluesy stanzas, and it starts off very bluesy, I got a woman. But, of course, everybody wants to know, who is this woman? For the life of me, it's been years, maybe decades, I cannot remember where I read the claim that this lyric is about the great American music icon Mavis Staples, who Dylan was dating around this time, and he very famously asked her father for her hand in marriage. But I was really shocked to, once I started researching to make this video, not see that claim anywhere in any of the pieces. So if anyone knows anything about that or has a better beat on which specific woman, if any, in Dylan's life that couplet is about, drop that in the comments. Mavis Staples was not from Jackson, from what I read, by the way. But Jackson, of course, is in Mississippi, and again, we're getting tied down to Mississippi and the blues. And regardless of whether or not these lines are about an actual woman or not, within the world of the song, it's, I got a woman in Jackson, I ain't gonna say her name, and then the topper. What a great way to finish the song. She's a brown-skinned woman, but I love her just the same. Very different from the Robert Johnson context. Is this a metaphor for Dylan falling in love with the blues? Let's go back to the very start of the song. Dylan / the narrator kind of stumbled into this music. This African-American music from the Mississippi Delta that he fell in love with, so much so that he wants to be a bluesman. But again, remember also, an outlaw. And by the way, keep in mind, when this lyric was being written down and when it was being sung, interracial couples were literally illegal in many parts of the United States. So that could be an outlaw relationship. And so this last couplet is possibly part metaphorical, part biographical. If the biographical part is there, we should note Mavis Staples was a gospel singer, not blues, who could still play a role in all this. Outlaw Blues, I hope you will agree now, a truly brilliant song, and one that in that classic Dylan way doesn't try to show off, doesn't even care if you notice how brilliant it is. And I mean that. I think that's something Dylan does a lot. Not always. He's got some songs that are showy, like, hey, look at this. You are meant to be dazzled by lyrics like, far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrow. Yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea, circled by the circus sands, with all memory and fate driven deep beneath the waves, let me forget about today until tomorrow. But then other times he does what I think he did here, which is, okay, I'm fine with the fact that 99.99% of the people are only going to ever enjoy this song at a surface level. Oh, what a fun bluesy lark. I'm reading a book by Patti Smith right now, M Train. It's great. Finally, I've never read any of her stuff before. But at one point she talks about she wrote something down so she could read it. The sentence was something like, I wrote so I would have something to read. Well, I think that's Dylan as a songwriter. Like, he makes this for himself because he wants to, and that's why he's okay with people maybe not getting how much there is going on. It's an audience of one. I really do believe that. Like, you don't write a song like a Rolling Stone as an exercise in, I hope this is a hit. Of course, it ended up being one, but it's really dense and long. It was a strange song. The man's written hundreds and hundreds of songs, so obviously there's different types in there. But that to me is Dylan the songwriter at his most Dylan-esque, and this song, Outlaw Blues, is a great example. Thanks.